As we creep in with lovely FM music. Hi, I'm BZ from NPR in my best FM monotone. Actually, I'm here because I'm going to be speaking to a great guest tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we're doing something entirely different tonight. No politics, no brawls, no bedlam, sorry. Instead, an interview of an author of a novel that I encountered in a most unusual way, for me at least. So I'd like to welcome author Deborah Busby into the Saloon, whom I happened to meet a few months ago. So welcome to the Saloon, Deborah Busby. It is good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for taking the time to physically stop by and appear in the studio. So what actually occurred was a complete reversal of how I come to customarily interview authors. That is to say, this time I met the author first instead of reading the book first and then deciding, hey, I'd like to talk to those people. So I met Deborah Busby at a weekend book signing at one of the few remaining national booksellers left, whose name I shall not mention because, well, for all sorts of different reasons, where she was autographing copies of her novel, Running from Roswell, oddly enough, of which I happen to have a copy right here, so that you know it's an actual book, and she's an actual author right there. Now, if I were smart, I would have taken a photograph of this and simply placed it up as an overlay, but I'm not necessarily that smart, which is one of the reasons I hope that you guys listen to me. So I met her at a book signing. So her book, Running from Roswell. Now, if you're a science fiction devotee like I am, Roswell, New Mexico. My dad was actually assigned to Roswell, New Mexico, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And so being sort of an intrepid science fiction devotee from the early 60s, I got into my brother's science fiction collection of paperback books a long time ago. Short stories, read all the classic sci-fi artists and authors, got a copy and still have my copy of the 1965 Ace book paperback by Frank Herbert of Dune, and got into science fiction that way. So I saw the book and I thought, ooh, Running from Roswell. Ooh, nice science fiction. But that's just one aspect. Okay. So we're going to go a whole bunch of different places tonight. What I'd like to do is, as I indicated, we spoke a little bit before the show, is kind of create a little point on the internet where prospective readers of Deborah Busby can go. They can go there, find out about her books, about her, and jump into her titles. So let's begin at the start, Deborah Busby, and tell me about your website and your social media and where your books can be found, if you would, please.
Certainly. So I have a website. It's debbusby.com. I had a website. This is just a point of reference. That was deborahbusby.com. But then somebody bought it out from under me and held it for ransom.
What?
And I refused to pay the ransom. So I had to go with Deb Busby. Yeah, it's not sad.
Someone must have known you and then went and bought that
out from under me and held it for ransom.
And they registered it first before you.
No, I had it. And I had it registered with GoDaddy.
Okay.
Sorry, I probably shouldn't say a name.
That's all right.
But I had it registered with them. And somebody bought it out from underneath me. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but it was in a different country. And they took it over.
All right.
And then they held it for ransom. And GoDaddy couldn't really help me. I said their name again.
That's all right.
They didn't help.
I'm curious. We haven't even gotten to the book yet. But already I'm curious. In terms of extortion, how much buckage did they want?
They wanted 5,000 American.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I pay like $125 a year for this website. I'm not going to pay you $5,000 to get my own website back.
This isn't just okay.
Yeah.
All right. Already.
So that's why it's debbusby.com, not Deborah. I am also on Facebook.
Okay.
Which is D.A. Busby Author.
Deborah Busby Author
Deborah
on
Busby
Facebook,
Author.
on X. I'm reading. I'm cheating. So
Okay,
I have a graphic up here that I'm looking at. So that's me cheating. D.A. Busby Author on X.
On
Because
X.
I just recently, I got my ass derezzed from X under the Hunter Biden laptop story. Because I dared to have the temerity to reference the original New York Post article about Hunter Biden. So the original Twitter completely suspended me. Gone. See ya. Flew away. I found out how to get back on Twitter because I'm nefarious that way. Even though I'm 74, I do have my wiles every once in a while.
That's good.
And now I've been on Twitter for, I don't know, probably 6 months. And I just enjoy being there because it's a big difference now with Musk than it was when I was there. And then it also says Instagram, D.A. Busby Author.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of stuff on Instagram?
I don't really. It's that they all connect. So if I post on Facebook, it uploads it to Instagram, which then goes to Threads. So it all just kind of connects, and it's just better if I have a username with all of them.
Alrighty.
Speaking of X, did you take the vote today?
What?
He had a vote if we wanted to go back to the name Twitter or we wanted to keep it as X. That was today.
I had heard that he was thinking about that.
Yeah, so he had a vote. I don't know how it turned out, but I still say Twitter, so I'm happy to go back to Twitter.
Everybody says Twitter. Oh, Twitter. Oh,
and
X.
I tweeted.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are we supposed to say?
I X'd.
Yeah, I know. So I'm happy that he's thinking about going back to Twitter.
Well, everybody's used to it.
Yeah.
So as I indicated before, we had a little chat, and I like to speak to everybody before we actually go on air. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the book, we'll get into writing, we'll get into the technical aspects of it, we'll get into things that you may have done in the past and current books and perhaps some future books. So
sure.
Give everybody, if you will be so kind, a little bit of an overview as to what your background is, because it's no amazing great shakes that for the longest time, I didn't want to admit that I was in North Idaho, and I never really named the area. I would say that I was in Kootenai County, especially during the voting show, but we're in North Idaho.
We are in North Idaho.
So did you grow up here? Stuff like that.
I did not grow up here. I grew up in Montana, right on the other side of the mountains.
Oh, nice.
So I grew up in a really small town named Shodo, and it's got like 1,800 people. And I lived there until I was 16, and then I moved to Portland, Oregon. And I lived there for about 12 years. And when I lived in Portland, I didn't want to admit I was from Montana because people would make fun of me. Like they didn't think we had running water and electricity. People made fun of where I was from. I thought it was weird, but yeah, I didn't claim Montana for the longest time.
You rubes don't have toilets.
Yeah, and now I don't claim Oregon.
Yeah, no kidding. Funny how the reversal has occurred, isn't it?
I don't claim Oregon at all. I mean, I love my friends from the Portland area that I grew up with or that I went to high school with, but I don't claim Portland as a home anymore. I left Portland and moved to Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh,
and that's really what I kind of consider my dual home is Phoenix. I lived there for 18 years, and Montana. Those are my two homes.
So where did you go to school mostly? Like elementary school, junior high, high school?
I went in Shodo. I was there until I was 16. So I all the way through school there. Okay. And then I graduated from a small little town outside Portland called Woodburn, which is in the agricultural part of Portland or south of Portland. And then I went to the Arizona area. I was getting divorced. I had 3 kids and I was tired of the rain. So I did some research on the internet, and I chose the one city in the country with the least amount of rainfall. And I moved there without knowing anything, knowing anyone. I knew no one when I moved there, and I took my 3 kids and we just transplanted down there. Loved it from the moment I set foot there. I loved living there. And I went to college at Northern Arizona University, entirely online. I was actually the first person to graduate from NAU without ever setting foot on campus. I walked in graduation, and that was the first time I'd ever set foot on their campus. So that was kind of a big deal back then because online education was brand new. So I got 2 master's degrees, a Master of Education, a Master of English, all of them online at NAU. So,
alrighty, I got 2 degrees. I got my first in communication studies because I was in radio at the time. It was a long time ago. And then I got my master's. I had a minor in English, and then I went back and got a master's in English. So we share that in common, except I have written absolutely nothing. I am not a published author in any way, shape, or form. So at a younger age, folks, we're talking to Deborah Busby, author of Running. Let me grab the book right there. Can you see it? Running from Roswell. And she has been kind enough to come into the studio tonight. So at a younger age, did you have any kind of an idea as to what it is that you wanted to be, what you wanted to have as a job? I guess, for lack of a better phrase, what you wanted to be when you grew up? What were your primary interests? Like, I want to be president. I want to drive a 1979 Peterbilt 359. What kind of things were you aspiring to at a younger age?
I wanted to be a microbiologist.
Okay.
And I just liked the way it sounded. And then I found out how much science and math I would have to do to be a microbiologist. And I knew that probably wasn't in my future. So then I decided I wanted to be a teacher. And the first time I went to college, I went for a degree in education. And then when I went back to college, I tried a bunch of different things. I probably changed my major 6 times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I wound up in the end going back to teaching because I'm a writing instructor, a college writing instructor. So that's where I wound up anyway. So I kind of wish I wouldn't just kept going with what I went with. But. So
like creative writing, fiction, nonfiction, anything with that much specificity, or writing in sort of general
writing. I have taught every writing class you could possibly think of at the college level. I've taught the intro to composition. I've taught creative writing. I've taught American literature. I've taught Shakespeare. Shakespeare was my favorite class. I know it's boring, but I love Shakespeare.
Somebody has to love Shakespeare. Okay. It may as well be you.
I do. I love Shakespeare. So I've taught a lot of different types of writing. And then where I found my niche was technical and business writing.
Oh, okay.
So that seems to be where I've really kind of found my place in teaching, where I feel most passionate about is helping people know how to communicate in writing, because they can't be successful in a career, most careers, unless they know how to communicate in writing. And because of some of the things, the tools that we have now, the AI and all of that, right, students don't know how to write. And so I feel that I can help them the most. That's where I can make the biggest impact.
Did you do any commercial or technical writing for any companies, anything like that? You had the interest. Mm-hmm. Did you go and do any kind of writing for any commercial interests?
The only technical writing I've done is in the education industry. I was a technical writer for a community college where I did all their curriculum. I did their college catalog, their student handbook, all of that technical writing that they have to do. So it was still in the higher education realm, but that was my experience with technical writing.
So were you interested in writing at a younger age?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And when you were a kid, did you write stories?
I did.
At a younger age?
I did. I wrote a lot of stories. And then when I started to get into my crazy teenage angst years, I wrote a lot of really bad poetry.
Of course,
that rhymey, oh, woe is me stuff. And then I wrote my first novel in my early 20s.
Okay.
And I call it my trunk novel. It was actually on a typewriter. That's how old I am. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
And I call it my trunk novel because it should never see the light of day. So I still have it, but it was awful. So.
And that's one thing usually most writers say. I find it interesting. So there's a guy named Terrence McCauley, who's a New York guy. He's way up in the state of New York. And he's the last guy that you would ever think would become a Western writer. But he started writing mysteries and kind of spy stuff. And then he submitted a Western story, and boom, this dude exploded. But he told me, and I generally ask this of all writers, he was a storyteller, and he came from a family of storytellers. And it informed him as to what he wanted to do. And the dude now crafts probably a book or 2 books a year. Talk about, he is an incredibly prolific writer. And one of the things I keep thinking is, where do you find your ideas? He finds them anywhere and everywhere. Mm-hmm. But he came from a long line. He remembers sitting and having like his grandfather and his father and people in the family just telling stories at night. So you have stories, you have ideas. Mm-hmm. Were you in a portion of a family where they had creative writing backgrounds, or they liked to write, or they suggested to you, you're very creative, you need to write something?
No. I had a childhood where my imagination was the way that I escaped from my life.
Okay.
And so I kind of went into my own little world and created a different life for myself. And that's kind of where I hid as I was growing up. I had an English teacher, Sue Facklum, she was my 7th and 8th grade English teacher. She was the one who told me, you can write. You have a very creative writing aptitude, and you should put your ideas and your stories down on paper. So she was the first person who encouraged me to write my stories and write things down.
So you kind of beat me to another question, which is good. Were you, because I also discovered with authors, they're generally big readers growing up.
Oh, Lord, yes.
Were you a big reader when you were growing up?
Yes. If I was not escaping into my own little creative world, I was escaping into something that somebody wrote. And, I always had my nose in a book. I was always down at the library picking up books. I think one of the first ones that I can remember was all of the Judy Blume books, and, how she just understood how, girls and young teens and tweens, what they're dealing with. And so a lot of her books really spoke to me. I wish she would write one now about, being older and becoming a grandma and going through menopause. I don't know. I just think that that'd be nice if Judy Blume wrote a book like that, because I would feel like she connected with me. So if she ever does, that's the book that I would love to read. And then I got into some of the classics. One of my favorite books of all time, which everyone rolls their eyes, is The Grapes of Wrath. I loved The Grapes of Wrath.
There you go. I love Steinbeck.
Yeah.
He's written some great stuff. And then he was from California, Monterey, all that kind of place, all those places over there. So I picked up one time while visiting Monterey. We used to go there in vacation, and I picked up a big stack of his books about like that, and I just went through them in about 2 months.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed his stuff, and it's historically oriented. I mean, you can go to places in Monterey and say, that's where John Steinbeck wrote. That's the corner where he was killed by a train in an automobile. He was in an automobile accident in a car, a 1940s car, and he was struck by a train and killed. How absolutely bizarre. So besides Judy Blume, John Steinbeck, anybody else kind of inform you, or you became a voracious consumer and reader of as you were growing up?
I'm trying to think. I read a lot of like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. I liked those, and they all had these little things, little novels, and they were like hundreds of them that you could get through really quick. And then V.C. Andrews. I know that's probably just going to make a lot of people. Flowers in the Attic.
Oh, yeah.
That was a book I was not supposed to read. My mother did not want me to read.
Really?
Oh no.
Oh,
that's taboo. And then I just started checking out a lot of different books. I remember The Thornbirds. I read that one. Oh, that was not a book I was supposed to read either.
Deborah Busby.
I know.
What were you doing? What were you thinking?
I know. So yeah, all those types of books. I think the book that eventually made me want to be an author is Mary Mackey and the Year the Horses Came. That's the book that made me. I know a lot of people don't know it. It's a pretty obscure book, but it is set.
That's me. Don't know it.
It is set in very early times in England, before England was the UK. It's way, way back. And it's when the Russian and the Chinese area brought horses over and conquered that land. And it's about one village and one girl and one family, and it walks you through that story. I would call it historical fiction.
I was just going to say, are you a fan of historical fiction? And apparently you are.
Yeah, I like historical fiction in that sense. There's other ones that I don't really like, but Mary Mackey, and she actually wrote 3 more books set around the same family and the same area and time, and they're all just magnificent. But it was definitely The Year the Horses Came.
So do you have any favorite genres? Or are you mostly I really like a singular genre, or are you kind of a little bit more wide-ranging?
I'm pretty wide-ranging. I like YA, and the reason I like YA is because it moves very fast.
Okay.
It's very action-packed. Like there's not a lot of detail. Well, there's detail, but it just moves really fast, and I like that about YA. I love mystery novels where, hopefully I would like mystery novels where they kind of build into something and you're not quite sure what's going to happen and the twists and turns that come. I have read some historical fiction. I also love Gregory Maguire and how he takes fairy tales and tells them from somebody else's perspective. Like he told the story of Cinderella from one of the ugly stepsisters' perspective. And he told, the Wizard of Oz from Elphaba's perspective. That Gregory Maguire, he's fantastic. It's kind of hard to read his writing sometimes because his language is very different, but I thoroughly enjoy that type of writing.
So most writers that I speak to have had some kind of, I guess for lack of a better words, some kind of an epiphany, a moment that they can specifically trace back and say, right there, that's the point. That's that I remember. That's when I wanted to be an author. It happened. And I went, bing, little light went over your head. Did you have any kind of a time or an epiphany where at some point you said, I'm going to give this a serious go? Yeah, I want to be an author.
I think I was always working towards this. I was always writing something, and it didn't dawn on me that I could actually publish anything. I was always a writer, but it didn't dawn on me that I could actually publish something until I was writing a story to my 3 children to explain to them why I left their father, why we moved and relocated our entire life and started everything over. And it kind of turned into a memoir. And my new husband encouraged me to look at publishers and look at agents. He said, you could probably get this published and you can help someone else that is in your situation. And so that, I guess, is the moment. I still didn't believe it, though. I kind of felt like an imposter at the time. I felt like, really? Could this really be something that someone else would care about? And then I got an agent, and then I got it published, and it kind of became a thing. And so I guess there wasn't really ever just a ding moment. It was more of a something thumping me over the head going, okay, you can really get published.
Okay. It's the bottom of the hour, folks. I'm BZ. That's Deborah Busby. And we're going to take a break right now. I'll be right back. When I come back, I'm going to ask Deborah Busby, the authors that I spoke to an author named James Elroy and Joe Wamba and Terrence McCauley and Matthew Betley. And to each and every one, I said, was there kind of a little impetus that made you say, I can be an author? And most all of them said, essentially, I just read the worst book possible. This was a piece of crap. Who's paying this guy to write this? I can do better than that. I'm BZ and you're not. This is the Saloon.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome to River of Common Sense, where we cut through the noise of news and politics with a sharp wit and clear discussion. Tune in every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a refreshing dose of reality as we fearlessly tackle the tough topics with no nonsense, just pure common sense. Visit shrmedia.com to discover where you can catch River of Common Sense in action. He's here to amplify your inner logic. He may not always be polite, he may not always be refined, but one thing's for sure, he always tells it like it is.
Independence. With that declaration, America was born. Inspired by a belief in the God-given rights of every human being, and in the good that comes from exercising these rights well. The founders of our great nation chose independence. As do we. Hillsdale College accepts no government funding because independence makes possible the good to which we aspire.
Attention, all patriotic women of faith. Yep, I'm talking to you, sis. Are you looking for high quality, super soft apparel that reflects your love for country and your devotion to God? Look no further than Carry Girl Gear. Picture this. You rocking a tee so soft it's like being hugged by a cloud, all while showing off your love for God and country. Sounds dreamy, right? Well, welcome to reality, babes, because that's what we're all about here at Carry Girl Gear. We specialize in super soft tees, tanks, and more, designed specifically for the strong, patriotic woman who proudly wants to carry their message of faith and freedom. When you shop with us, you're not just getting a t-shirt. You're joining a community of like-minded women who are proud to wear their beliefs straight on their tees. So whether you're sipping sweet tea on the porch or leading the charge for faith and freedom, do it in a Carry Girl tee. Because life's too short for stiff, boring tees. CarryGirl.com, where faith and freedom meets fashion.
You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for being here tonight in the Saloon. I greatly appreciate it. If you would, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, if you would, please. We either get, a porcelain Dalmatian or I get more vodka. I'm not sure which. Mostly I prefer the vodka, but that's just me. Anyway, we have tonight in the Saloon, we have Deborah Busby, and welcome. It's good to see you here. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And when last we left, before we were so rudely interrupted by promotions, etc., I said something similar to, a lot of the authors that I spoke to have said they read a book, they read a crappy book, and they said, I can do better than that. Did you ever think something like that? Read a book and go, man, that was terrible. Why'd I pay money for that? I can do better.
Yes.
And did you?
Yes, I believe I did do better.
Okay.
I was an avid reader of a particular famous author, and I got to probably his 9th novel, and you could just tell that he'd run out of stories and was starting to recycle.
Okay. Who was it? Come on, out with it. Who was it? Come on.
It was Nicholas Sparks.
Okay. Alrighty.
Yeah. He came out. What was interesting is about 6 months after that particular book, he came out and said he had writer's block, that his contract makes him write a book a year. And he really was struggling with writing a book. So he just basically put something out. And I guess at that point, I thought, if Nicholas Sparks can do it like that, as I can do it. And I think that my books are better than his, at least at that one. I mean, my favorite book of his is The Choice, which is an absolutely fantastic book, but it was written early in his career when he still had a lot of passion for writing. I don't know, you can just tell now that he has no passion for it anymore. He might argue with me, but I don't think he has any passion for it anymore.
Two guys that I think are obscenely wordy that I initially I wanted so much to like. Stephen King, way too wordy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Move on. Nothing to see here.
Yeah.
And Frederick Forsyth, because I wanted a whole ton to like him. But he just kept, it's like droning. Okay, dude, can you just stop with it? Anyway, as I said before the show, I said, I'm actually trainable. One of the first authors that I interviewed, I kind of messed up the plot and stuff, and I kind of revealed maybe a little bit more than I should have. And that particular author was not really pleased with me. So I have learned, folks, Tell us, if you would, Deborah Busby, about this book that you see right here, Running from Roswell. And I want to show you this, okay, because this is important. Don't go away. Look, autographed by the author right there. That's how I got to know her. I first had her autograph the book, then I read the book. Exactly backwards from what I normally do. Anyway, having said that, can you give us in your own words sort of a summary, without me trying to Bigfoot anything, about what is this about? What's Running from Roswell about?
It is about the disappearance of a man, an older man, and he, 20 years earlier to the day he disappears, his girlfriend disappeared in the desert. And he insisted that she had been abducted by aliens. And everyone in Roswell assumed that he murdered her. And so he was kind of the town whack job. And he was the one that everybody kind of stayed away from because there was no proof. There was nothing, so they couldn't arrest him. So they just all went on with this belief that he had murdered her and just claimed aliens had abducted her. Well, then he goes missing in the same circumstances from the exact same place a year or 20 years later. And it's on the White Sands Missile Range. So the FBI gets called in, and there's a disgraced, jaded FBI agent named Oliver Reagan who goes and has to pick up the case. And he goes to Roswell to try to find out more about the man and runs into his niece. And his niece is named Amity, and she is a rookie on the Roswell Police Department. And she is adamant that she is going to help with the investigation, even though Oliver wants nothing to do with her. And so the two join forces, and they realize that in order to solve her Uncle Van's disappearance, they have to solve his girlfriend Jolene's disappearance from 20 years earlier. That is the premise of the book.
Okay. All righty. And because I've learned I'm actually trainable, this is where I'll stop.
Okay.
Okay. Because there are other questions that I would like to ask you, but that would be, I think, probably a little bit too revelatory into the book itself, which, by the way, folks, I'm telling you, if you want to read a book, hang on, right here, Running from Roswell. Look, down below, right there, down below. It says author Deborah Busby, Running from Roswell. This is it, my copy right here, and you can't have it. This is my copy. So what did you want to say with this book? Or did you just set out to create something that primarily entertained?
No, I of course I want to entertain, but I watched a documentary called The Missing 411.
Okay.
And it is about people who have gone missing in the desert under very strange circumstances. And it fascinated me because I lived in the desert for 20 years and weird shit happens in the desert.
Yes, of course. Your Phoenix background.
Yes. And just weird stuff happens in the desert. I mean, it's just all bizarre. And so what I set out with this book is it is the inaugural book of a series.
Okay.
And I've already outlined 10 more books.
But not like you have any plans or anything.
No, not at all.
No. Okay.
And I'm almost done with book 2, and it is about skinwalkers.
Okay.
And it is a book that is very close to my heart because I had a very dear friend who was a member of the Navajo Nation, and he sat with me for hours and talked to me about their traditions and what really skinwalkers are and all of those things. And he passed away a few years ago, and I never got to tell his story, which really just kills me because he was going to let me write his story.
That would have been really cool.
Yeah, he had a heart condition and he died 13 times. And so he had seen a lot.
What?
And he eventually got a heart transplant. And it's just an amazing, amazing story. And I so wish I would have been able to tell it, but he's gone now. And we had talked about it just a few months before he passed away. He rejected the heart. And we talked about telling his story. And I finally convinced him to just start recording things for me. I said, you don't have to write anything down. Just, record it or I'll interview you or whatever. But so this is the way that I feel like I can do him justice, is by writing this Skinwalker book that he inspired, that he helped me with. So that's where I feel like I can honor him.
So I get the Roswell thing, mm-hmm. and I get the science fiction thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why the UFO type bent for this? Because there's something in me right now. It makes me want to say, okay, there's one particular aspect in this book that you don't really explain, and maybe I should mm-hmm. just drop it right there. All I can say is instead of revealing it, it's so tough not to do. But are we gonna see that again? Are we gonna see something similar to that again? And I will not, folks. I will not tell you what we're talking about. I just want to know, are we going to see that again?
Yes, we're going to see that again because, and the reason I didn't maybe explain it or reveal the answer is because I am setting it up for a series. Okay. This wasn't going to be a one-off. If it was going to be a one-off, I would have answered all of the questions, but I wanted to leave it open so that it could go into more books.
So folks, I'm just going to leave it nebulous right there. Okay. All right. I kind of got my answer. All right. To me, this is screaming sequel. So am I revealing anything by saying that I looked at that, I read it, and then I thought, okay, you're going somewhere with this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And
I am going somewhere with this book. This book is I kind of want you to think about it as the first episode in a TV series, that kind of, or maybe the first season in a TV series where we're going to continue on and carry things on into other books. It's not just going to be its own novel.
So it's part of a big old hanging arc to include up to potentially 10.
Right now, 10 books. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Alrighty. So clearly there is going to be a sequel. Are you going to use the same characters? The two, the protagonist and, I'll just say, are you going to use will those two characters continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are going to continue. They are going to open a private investigation firm called Sonoran Desert Investigations.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, not me.
They're going to investigate the weird in the desert.
Okay.
So all of the books are going to be just the strange shit that happens in the desert, because there's a lot of it. It's not just aliens that happen in the desert. There's, a lot of different, there's paranormal all over, and there's skinwalkers. There's, there's ghosts. There's lots of different things that I'm going to go into, and it's all just going to be strange. I think I'm also going to incorporate the lizard man. I just watched a documentary the other day about the lizard man, and I have to write about it. So that's my latest one. I watch so many paranormal documentaries. It's incredible. And so I get a lot of those kind of weird ideas from that.
So you're going to introduce new characters, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Do you have any characters, any semi-major characters in mind that, sometimes you'll have an author like John Sanford will have a series of books, and then a character will grab his interest, and then boom, there'll be a tangent from that where he, like Virgil Flowers, he has a bunch of Virgil Flowers books because that character apparently grabbed him. So are you thinking that if you have any interesting characters, are you leaving options open for, if I come across and I create a character that I think is really cool, I may do a series on that individual because they really amuse me right now?
Yes. If there is a character besides Amity and Oliver that I absolutely fall in love with and I can't just write them out and not bring them back, I would love to do like an offshoot series.
Okay.
And I have different ideas about how I could do that.
Okay.
Like, I think Northern Idaho is a really interesting place to write about.
Ton of cool stuff up here.
Yeah,
are you going to George R.R. Martin your characters? Are you going to kill characters left and right? You can't go through a George R.R. Martin book with seeing the dead, burnt bodies of all the various characters, kicked to the curb.
I have to say that George R.R. Martin, I need to send him my therapy bill because I watched.
He's in Arizona or New Mexico. He lives around there somewhere.
I don't know.
He's in the desert. That's all I remember.
I remember when Game of Thrones came out and it was about to premiere. I got some very wise advice from a young 18-year-old boy in one of my English composition classes. And he said, Professor Busby, because I said, I'm so excited for this show. And he said, Professor Busby, I want you to know right now, don't get attached to anyone. No one.
That's
right.
Pretty much
That's what he
true.
said. And it was really good advice. So then I started watching. And then my favorite character got his head chopped off. And I said, I'm never watching another episode of this show again. And I stopped watching it. In fact, my family watched it without me. And I'd go upstairs and do something on my own. And I would hear them downstairs going, oh, or, yelling at the TV. And then I think it was right before it ended the season. I thought, I'll just give it a chance. And I binged the whole thing in like a month. And I love it now. Like, I love it. But I had to get over that. Him killing people off. There's some advice out there for writers. You have to kill your darlings. So I do take that. I do take that to heart that everything can't be a happy ending, and you have to kill your darlings.
How has the reception been, folks? This is the book, Running from Roswell, and I'm speaking to Deborah Busby tonight. How has the reception to this book been?
It's been very good. It's I've gotten a lot of really good reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, and I mean the reviews are just fantastic. People love it. One review started out something along the lines of, "Get your tinfoil hats on, people," and it's just they love it. It's really been something that has been received well. My husband reads my reviews for me, so I don't read them just because. And
he brooks the wave first, looks at it, and then, by the way, folks, if you haven't gotten it already, her husband is like right over there, listening and watching and laughing appropriately, or perhaps inappropriately sometimes. I don't know.
Well, and the reason being is because I'm a human and I am very self-critical, and I unfortunately went through my Amazon reviews, and there was a lot of 5-star reviews. People loved the book. And there was one person who said she didn't like the book.
And then
said it was slow.
And then you focused like a laser beam. Son of a, I shouldn't have read.
I know. It kept me up at night. I got to be honest, it kept me up at night. Blocked me a little bit for a couple of weeks. And then I'm thinking to myself, but what about all these glowing 5-star reviews? And so that's why I don't read them. I don't look at them. It's not because I don't want to know. It's because I'll hone in on the negativity. And I, as a creator, I can't do that.
Well, you're in good company. Harper Lee didn't read anything about any of this stuff, like To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay. Set it on ignore mode. So since you dipped your toe into science fiction, do you have more science fiction novels teed up? Not necessarily in the vein of Running from Roswell with those characters, but you said you're open to other genres or maybe other books in a similar genre, since you've kind of warmed up a little bit to science fiction. And I'm kind of asking for a very specific reason.
I do have more books that I have thought about writing. I actually already have one under contract that is coming out next year. It's called Canyons, and it is a one-off book. Okay. And it is a very, very dark book. Okay. It is has to do with suicidal ideations and being haunted and all of those things that kind of, if you attempted suicide, did not succeed, and brought somebody back with you. You opened the door. Something back with you.
Thing.
Yes. And so that is the vein of Canyons. That one, I actually wrote that as a screenplay first because I was in a screenplay writers group, and I wrote it as a screenplay first. And I got some really good advice. Someone told me, hey, this might be better as a novel because you can really dig into the character and why she does the things she does. Whereas in a screenplay, you can't do that. So I turned around and wrote it as a novel.
So, folks, I'm talking to Deborah Busby, author of this book, Running from Roswell. I forgot to ask, how did your book signing go, by the way? Did you get some people to purchase the book and you signed your name and that?
Sure.
Was it beneficial?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. It was amazing. When I first got there and I was right inside the door, I was a little, because it was just right there. Hello, here I am. I mean, I was literally right inside the door. And, but it was a good place. It was a good place to be. And the more people came, there was more that walked up, and I got to meet a lot of people. I signed a lot of books, and it was a success. I loved it. Okay. It was fun.
Super beneficial. So I'm going back to your website. Let me put this up here just for a second so folks can see it. If I can find it, I'll put it up there. son of a gun, why can't I? Anyway, I'm going to go back to your website. And one of the things from your website that you wrote was, I write what I enjoy reading most, mysteries and women's fiction. I pride myself on illustrating ordinary people's experiences, human emotions that audiences and readers can connect with. Well, so with that in mind, let's go back in time a little bit. Do you remember, what was your first sale?
The first book I sold.
The first book you sold.
That would be
that you got actual
money,
U.S. currency for.
That would be Turning Point, which was a contemporary women's fiction novel. And that was also, it won the Great Northwest Book Festival. And it was number 1 on Amazon's bestseller list. So that's kind of like my
nice.
Cool. So, and then I wrote 11 books after that. I lose track
because I went to your site.
Lot, yeah.
I went to your site and I looked, and on your site there are 11 books.
Okay, so it's 11 books total. They're all contemporary women's fiction books, and what I originally set out to do with those books is I was trying to work through things that I had dealt with emotionally, and I was trying to therapize myself, so to speak, where I would have, an issue or something that I struggled with, maybe growing up, maybe last week, whatever it was. And I decided, I'm going to write a book about this. I'm going to finish, I'm going to work through the problem. And so that was probably the first 2 or 3 of those books. Changing Hands was probably the most pivotal one for me. I had a son when I was 17 that I gave up for adoption. And it was a closed adoption. I had no idea where he was. And so I wrote the book. I actually started with the ending where they were reunited. He found her. And then I kind of worked my way backwards. So because I wanted that reunion more than anything. And so I wrote that book from that perspective to help me deal with that sort of thing and for that trauma in my life. Since then, I have been reunited with that son. We've been back together for about 8 years now. So that's fantastic. And if I wrote that book today, it would be entirely different.
It would be a different book.
Completely different book. And so that's what I mean by when I was trying to work through things is things in my life. And that, I don't know, that's just where the contemporary women's fiction took me. And I got to the end of those novels and I felt like I didn't have anything left to say. And I didn't have anything left to write about. And I took a few years off. And that's when I pivoted to something I'm also equally passionate about, which is paranormal, sci-fi, all of those things. And so that's why I'm shifting gears now.
Everybody always asks me to ask authors, how many times did you submit manuscripts and find yourself at the receiving end of a rejection letter? And at any point, this is a sort of a double pronged. See, I hear the laughing already.
Yeah,
okay?
mm-hmm. We talk about this every once in a while.
So did you get to a point where you thought, that's it, fine, I'm not giving up. Tell you what, I'm doubling down. I'm not taking no for an answer, and I'm continuing.
Yes. And for me, rejection is just part of my life. I probably have been rejected 1,000 times. I would say I still have them all. I have probably 3,000.
All your letters?
I do. They're mostly emails. Thanks, no thanks. Some people send little postcards that are just like, thanks. No,
I was going to say,
suck.
if you have a fireplace, that'd be a great starter.
I don't know. To me, they motivate me more than anything because I'm like,
was my point.
I'm like,
yes,
screw you is kind of how I feel. But for me, I guess the thing that pushed me was I had a publisher, and I published the memoir, and then that publisher went out of business, and I got the rights to my book back. And then I started writing contemporary women's fiction, and I had 3 novels published with a publisher. And those were my first 3, Turning Point, Sacrifice, and Changing Hands. And they were all with that publisher. Then that publisher went out of business and gave me the rights to my book back. And I was just like, why am I going with publishers at this point? Because they all go out of business. They were all, So I started self-publishing. I think that was my motivation to be like, screw the publishing industry. I'm going to go and do this on my own because I don't need them. And I did very well in the contemporary women's fiction vein as a self-published author. I still get royalty checks to this day. I still get 3 or 4 a month. It's not huge, but I'm still making royalties off those books. But when I changed genres and I went with the sci-fi, I did take 3 years off. And when I changed genres, I went and decided I need some support now because this is a new thing for me. I mean, contemporary women's fiction, I had that formula down. So, but with mystery.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
You say you had that formula down. Is that formula a formula that essentially every fiction writer in that genre uses? Is it like, okay, here's the template, insert this here, go?
Sort of. It's more of you have your introduction, your inciting incident, and your resolution, but then there's peril, and then everything kind of works out in the end.
Okay.
Sometimes the peril, somebody dies. Of course, you don't want to die, but in the end, most contemporary women's fiction novels end on a happy note, or at least an uplifting note where something has been learned and life goes on, so to speak. So that it's more of a model that people go through, not necessarily a template, but it's definitely there's sections that you will see in most contemporary women's fiction novels.
Because self-published stuff has really pissed off the publishing industry, and except that there is huge precedence for this. And 2 guys that I read, there's a guy named Andrew Weir who wrote The Martian.
Oh, yes, I know that story. And that is like my wish is that somebody reads my book and goes, I want to make that into a movie.
And then, then all of a sudden, boom, that exploded. He exploded. And then there's another guy that I read named Hugh Howey. And he wrote a book called, he self-published, I think on Amazon, a book called Wool, which everybody now would recognize as Silo. If you you go to Apple TV, there's I think the 2nd season is on Silo, but he self-published, and then apparently he became a big Mack truck rolling downhill at about 75 miles an hour, and then people were rushing to get him published. And so it can be done. You can go from a self-published book to all of a sudden people want to pay you for your stuff, which I think is a wonderful thing. Pay me? Oh yeah, I'll take that. Also, I asked you about science fiction for a reason, because on your site it says, I am a Bigfoot paranormal investigator by night. I am obsessed with urban legends, the supernatural, and the unexplained. Well, as I told you, I had a buddy that was in here, and he has a show. He was in the Saloon here, and this is the guy's face. That's Alan Thomas, and he's a Bigfoot and Sasquatch investigator. And next to him is a guy named Nate Rudd, who is just inside Washington. And he has had a Sasquatch encounter, and he was here. And he's a great, wonderful guy. Alan Thomas is filled with the milk of human kindness, but he knows and has seen any number of Sasquatches. So we did 5 shows, for example, and all that stuff right here. So I don't just do politics. I do a bunch of other things. He died on the operating table twice because he has CRPS now, which is a terribly debilitating, painful disease because of it. But he says that made him receptive to a whole bunch of stuff. So, what did you get inspired by this, by Bigfoot, the supernatural, because of the environment, or necessarily because you had your own personal encounter, or you were just kind of enthused about this for a long time, had an interest in this?
I've always had a bit of an interest in it. I've had my own paranormal experiences. I have never been lucky enough to see a Sasquatch. I've heard one, but I have not actually seen one. I would love to see one. I would probably pee my pants, but I would love to see one. But for me, I am very connected with the spiritual or the spirit realm. And I've had ghost and paranormal experiences since I was a child. I remember when I was probably about 4 or 5, I was lifted up in my bed and moved over by a shadow man that used to live in our attic. And I have seen many ghosts. Probably the most profound experience I had was when I lived alone with my 3 children. I was a single mom, 3 kids, and I had a ghost that lived in my kitchen, and she would ring bells in my kitchen every night while I was sleeping, and it would wake me up and it would wake the children up. And I went into my kitchen one night, and I knew it wasn't a bad spirit, nothing nefarious. You could tell, it was a female presence and she just wanted attention. And I went into my kitchen and I said, listen, I'm a single mom who lives here by herself with her 3 children. Would you stop ringing the goddamn bells? Right? And I went back to my bedroom, never heard her again. And so it's always just been stuff like that. The spirit realm has always been around me, and I've always just kind of been in tune with that side of the world and things. I see lights in the sky, then I don't automatically think that it's a weather balloon. I mean, I know that there's something up there and that we are not alone in this universe. And do I know if we've been visited by aliens? I have no idea, but I want to think that we have, and I want to believe that we have. And I believe in that. And so when I watch a documentary or I hear people's experiences, I devour them. I want to know more. And so I live my life in curiosity.
So you'd be a good Scully with a mix of Mulder.
Absolutely.
Okay. Good.
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm asking you that because do you have any books that are planned in the future where you might have something involving a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch or, okay. And again, your husband is laughing over there, and that means something. So, okay.
Well, he's my sounding board. So he's the one that, if I come up with an idea and I'm like, hey, does this sound like a good thing? He's like, and then we kind of, work it out together. He's my sounding board. So, that's why he's laughing. Is not too long ago, probably in the last week, we talked about how I could write a Bigfoot novel. And there are Bigfoot sightings in the Sonoran Desert, but I really think that I might write another series, and I might set it in northern Idaho, and I might set it in Spirit Lake, Idaho, because Spirit Lake, that lake is haunted and it has a legend to it. And there's a spirit tree. Do you know any of that story of living up here?
No, I don't.
Yeah, there's a spirit tree. I would think it's like Grandmother Willow from Pocahontas. I don't know, but it's the Native Americans called it the Lake of the Spirits, and that's how that town got its name. And that the lake is said to be haunted by a bride and a groom who died before they were able to get married. And so you can hear them howling and wailing. certain times of the night when the fog rolls in and all of that. So it's just, there's a lot up here too. So it's kind of like
Very squatchy.
I spent 18 years in the desert and there was all that crazy stuff down there. But now that I've lived up here for as long as I have, it's kind of like there's a lot up here too. So yes, I definitely plan to write novels. I don't know if it's going to be in this Sonoran Desert Mysteries vein, but Bigfoot is definitely going to make an appearance in a novel or novels coming soon.
There's a guy named Max Brooks who wrote a book called Devolution about Sasquatch. And then there's another guy that wrote a book. He normally writes Christian-oriented books, but he wrote this about an individual being kidnapped by a Sasquatch. So the books are out there, and I would just submit to you, I think if you're interested in doing that, there's a big thirst out there for people that are interested in that kind of a thing. Now, you're teaching at university right now, and obviously you are a teacher well-versed in that. Are you aiming to make writing a full-time gig?
I would love to be able to make writing a full-time gig.
All righty. So now, this is the part that I am personally interested in. Oh, shoot. I didn't make my break. So, folks, I just want to tell you about this. This is where you are right now.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
So now we're going to talk about authors.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about your regimen, because you have an actual day job.
I do.
And you have a husband, you have kids, you have a life, you have things you have to go and do. So everybody is different. And I love asking authors about this. Do you write best at night? Do you write best during the day? When is the time of day that you find most creative?
I find myself to be most creative in the afternoon and the evening. I find myself to be most technical and productive in the morning. So that's when I do my work. That's when I do my real job. And then afternoon and the evening is when I tend to be more creative. I try to have a regiment, but at the same time, I'm one of those people that if the writing, I call it the writing bug. If the writing bug is not with me that day, I'm not going to force myself to write, 2,000 words today or anything like that. Usually what I'll do is if I've set some time aside to write and the writing bug is not with me, I'll do some research or I'll do some editing or I'll do something that's maybe less creative, but I'm still working towards a goal of getting a novel written. But I tend to be, my process tends to be all over the place. There was one, like Changing Hands, I wrote the end first. Somewhere in between, I wrote the end first. And then I wrote the rest of the novel around it. So I'm not a start at the beginning and work my way all the way through a book. I start at the inspiration point and then build the novel around it. So for me, it's a little bit different. I know there's a lot of authors out there that are very regimented and they're like 2,000 words a day. We're going to, start at the beginning. We're going to work our way through to the end. And that's just not how I find myself working the best in my process.
Music? No music. Does it have to be rock solid quiet, or do you clap on a set of headphones or ear pods and go to town?
I always have to have something playing in the background or I go absolutely insane. So It cannot be quiet. I will sometimes listen to music, but a lot of times I'll have movies playing in the background. One of my favorite series to write to is Harry Potter, because J.K. Rowling is like my hero.
Okay.
And so I have Harry Potter. I probably watched Harry Potter 1,500 times. Because
just like my wife.
Yeah, I just play them kind of on a loop, and it plays in the background, and it works for me because it's background noise, but at the same time, it's like, that's fucking J.K. Rowling, and she's my hero, and she wrote Harry Potter on a napkin, homeless in a restaurant, in a diner, And if she can do it, I can do it. And so that's another reason that I have that playing in the background. I'll play other things too sometimes, but most of the time it's just something on TV playing in the background while I write. I don't know why, but that helps with my creativity.
Well, everybody's different. There's another author that says that when he writes a book, he thinks cinematically. And what he'll do is he'll play actual music from various films because that really inspires him. Some of the best music coming out today are from creators that create soundtracks, from John Williams, some people that he has to put on something really cinematic and inspiring for him to go. And so another question is, it's like they're playing, he said, it's like I'm playing a movie in my head, and they see cinematic aspects as they're writing. And then they, in their mind's eye, they see, here's this scene, and it's very bold, and I see this kind of music, and I'm sort of crafting it with a movie in mind. I'm putting down the movie that I see in my head. Is that anything similar to what you do?
I usually cast my characters as real actors before I start writing.
So you have somebody in mind?
Absolutely.
Okay. Dare I ask you who you had in mind? You listen, if you open that door, do not expect me not to walk through that door. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, but hey, you can decide not to answer. If you don't want to do that, that's okay. Just, it's interesting to note that you have very specific inspirations.
I do. I will tell you who I had in my mind when I was writing Oliver and Amity. I don't think I've told anybody this. I don't even think he knows this. My husband. Whoa. Oliver is Christopher Plaha. So I don't know if you know who that is, but no. Christopher Plaha. And then Amity is Rachel Bilson, a younger Rachel Bilson from when she was in Heart of Dixie.
Christopher Polaha?
Polaha, yes. P-O-L-A-H. Yeah.
Okay, so...
Yeah.
Is that the guy?
That's the guy.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, there he is up on the screen.
And
that's her inspiration for the FBI agent.
It is.
And it is. And that's the guy because...
At the time when I started writing this, he was doing a mystery series. He was doing mystery movies with, oh Lord, I can't remember her name, but they were on Hallmark Mystery. And he was the police officer agent type. And I love Christopher Polaha. I don't know how many people have seen him in things, but I would watch him read the phone book. I love him.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. It's not a crush. I love his acting. I love Christopher Polaha. And Rachel Bilson, she's probably a little bit older than Amity is now, but she was, when she was younger, she was in a show called Heart of Dixie. And she was just very innocent and everything's going to work out great. And
that's her, Rachel Bilson?
That is Rachel Bilson, yeah.
And so that's your Amity right
that's
there.
My Amity.
And so as far as that photo is concerned, that's about the right age
yes, it is.
For Amity.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I find that really fascinating because no other author that I've spoken to has said that when I see character X, I'm thinking about this dude or this dudette over here. They have never gotten that specific before. But it's interesting that you use that to inform the creation of your characters. So
absolutely,
this is a new one for me. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: when you write a book,
mm-hmm.
And authors tell me something completely different. Some authors say, it's all about the writing. I got to get it on the page. And other authors have said, I almost don't care what I put down on the page. For me, it's all about the editing. So some authors say, I'll put it on the page and then I don't care. I'll come back because I know I'm a great editor and I can take care of any mistakes that I may have made. And besides, I'm going to change my mind anyway. So with you, or am I pigeonholing too much? Is it all about the writing, or is it about, okay, once I've got this down, I'm an editing mother.
In the infamous words of Richard Castle, you cannot edit a blank page. I get it down on paper and then I edit the fuck out of it.
Okay. All right. So it's about both, basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you ever looked at a skeleton draft of one of my novels, you would be like, she's never going to get a novel out of this. And then 90,000 words later, there it is in all of its beauty. So I have a process. I outline it first. So I get my idea and then I outline. So I've got 10, 11 outlines for this series, like I said. The next thing I do is I write what I call a skeleton draft, where I put it into kind of writing, where I put it into chapters. And each chapter becomes its own individual scene or section.
And you say, I want this to happen here in this chapter, this chapter, this chapter.
Yes.
Then you go back.
Yes. And then I go back and I start at the beginning and I take each individual chapter separately and say, okay, now I'm going to edit this and I'm going to make it a chapter. And then I work my way from there. And I probably go through it 4 or 5 times, I'd say, from outline to final draft. It's 4 or 5 times.
Joe Wambaugh told me that he used to carry a notebook with him all the time, wherever he went. And when he heard, particularly, Joe Wambaugh was, he reminded me a little bit about James Ellroy. Yeah, he had some narrative, but he was also about dialogue too. And when something resonated with him in terms of dialogue, he'd flip out his little notebook and write it down, and he would make sure that he included it in one of his books. When you see or hear something, or is it part of your custom that I keep a diary, I have a notebook, or do you just, you'll see something will inspire you, and you just pigeonhole it into your Mark 1, Model 1 brainulus, and you just remember that when the time comes to put something on the page? Do you archive anything, I guess?
I do archive things, but if I have an idea that is really good, it bounces around in my brain and will actually keep me up until I write it down. So I have to write it down at some point. I used to carry a notebook with me all the time, always had a notebook with me where I would write ideas down. And I still do carry a notebook, but most of the time I have a smartphone with a notes app. And so I'll just write notes if I really need to get something down right then. Otherwise, I just keep it in my head until I can get home and write it down.
Okay. I told you I'd ask you weird questions.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me one thing that no one would ever suspect of you that you'd like people to know. I have 1,000 different answers for that.
Oh, that's a really tough question.
Thank you. I'll be here all night. Tip your waitress.
What is something about me that I wish people knew?
That's okay. We'll move on. When you go home, you're going to go home in, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, whenever it is. And you go back and you sit at your writing desk. Are you working on a current book right now? And can you tell us what it is?
Yes. I am currently working on a book.
Okay.
I am hoping to have it to my publisher in January.
Can you tell us anything about it?
Yeah, it is the Skinwalker book. It's called The Witches of Winslow.
Okay.
And it focuses on a young girl who goes missing in Winslow. She's 12 years old. And she goes missing on her way home from the park. And her father is a former colleague of Oliver's. And so he comes and asks Oliver and Amity for their help because the police have deemed her a runaway. Well, when they get there, they realize there's actually 6 missing girls from Winslow, and the police have not connected them.
So besides that, now you have 10 potential novels coming up in the series with regarding Amity, an extension of Running from Roswell.
Correct.
Any other genres or books that in your mind you have, okay, once I get through with this, I am definitely going over here and doing this one because that really interests me? Anything that stands out?
There is another book that I would love to write next. And that is, it's a YA book. It's a YA series called The Majestic 12. And I definitely want to go over there at some point. I'm definitely going back there.
Okay.
I already have written the first book.
And you're referring to that title? You're referring to that group?
Yes.
Okay.
But I have a different take on that group.
Okay.
So
I could ask you, but you're not going to tell me.
I am not going to tell
So I'm
you.
not going to ask you about that.
No.
But very few people, except those who are inclined in this fashion, know who the Majestic 12 are.
I know.
What group that was, and I'm not going to say.
You know what's going to happen is tomorrow when I get into my Google and I type MAJ, Majestic 12 is going to come up because so many people have Googled it. It's going to be trending on Google.
There you go.
There it is.
Do you have a favorite character so far that you've written?
Yes. I of course love Oliver and Amity, but my favorite character of all time, his name was Casey, and he was the protagonist in The Sacrifice. He was a Marine, which is a little close to my heart. So in that book,
Gee, I can't imagine why.
I know.
Sir.
Yes. So he was my absolute favorite to the point where I had to bring him back. He's in like 2 or 3 more of my contemporary women's fiction novels. I just had to bring him back because I set most of them in the Pacific Northwest. And so it was pretty easy to have these people be friends with him or run into him. I couldn't leave him out of my books. Yeah.
Well, that basically says that people write things that they are familiar with, that inform them. And basically the bottom line is, why wouldn't you? Because that's where some of the best novels and some of the best books come from. So Deborah Busby, author of this book right here, Running from Roswell. And I want to show you this again, folks. Okay, first, there she is. That's her. And she autographed the book, proving that this is a real honest-to-God book. And by the way, just out of curiosity, I guess I could say I'm a book hoarder. I keep books. All of my entertainment I own. I don't believe in anything. I own all my CDs, all my movies, all my books. And the reason is because no one can take it from me if they ever decide that for whatever reason, they're going to do exactly that. Deborah Busby, Running from Roswell. Is there anything that you would like to tell us in wrapping this up that I may have missed about the book, or anything that you feel that, old fat guy, you just didn't get to this, and I'd like to say something about that, about the book?
I would actually like to ask you a question.
Sure.
Did you like the book?
I did like the book.
Okay.
Yes, but it comes back to the it comes back to the thing that cannot be named.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I've had other people tell me that too.
I can't. I won't. I will not Bigfoot you, so to speak.
Thank you.
And but there was an aspect in it that I found frustrating. Now I understand why you did it.
Yes.
I grok
Thank
that
you.
concept. But in there, when I got to that part, like right here, I went, wait. And then I thought, okay, she's going to talk to us about this. She's going to write something about this. And no, you didn't. And then when I read the end, and I finally understood, okay, I get it. I see where she's going now. Then I thought, okay, calm down. 210 over 190 is not a good way to go through life. So just calmate, and all will be well.
Yeah, I have had a couple of people express that same frustration and say like,
A couple.
yeah, I know, way more than a couple, and are like, when is book 2 coming out? Because I need to know, what's coming next. And so I am working on it, and I promise it will be out. And it's not a one-off. I'm not going to leave anyone hanging.
Okay. So I'm going to have to ask this question because it just needs to be asked, because all the people that have already read this book that I'm showing you right there, Running from Roswell, from Deborah Busby, and just, a ballpark. How long do you think before you're going to come out with the next one?
Within the year.
Okay. Within 2025.
Yeah, it'll be released in 2025.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, Deborah Busby, thank you very much for being here. It was a
Thank
pleasure
you for having me.
and a blessing. And I said, oh, look, gee, we've been on for an hour and a half. And I said something similar to at the beginning of the show. I said, and to you, it will seem like it was just 5 minutes. Did it seem like it was a really long time, or did it seem like it was about 5 minutes?
About a half hour ago, I looked up at the clock and I said, holy crap, it's already 8 o'clock. So no, it felt like it went by very fast for me.
Just as I thought.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask that is because I know that I'm doing my job when somebody that I'm speaking to says, hey, it's the end of the show. That makes me smile. It's like Chief Dan George. My heart soars like an eagle when I hear things like that.
You did great.
So thank you very much. Oh, no, you did great. So thanks for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that was Deborah Busby. I'm going to have to wrap this up. I am BZ, and you are not, and it's time for ta-ta and time for bye-bye. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. Promotional consideration. You need a producer, BZ. Okay, promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and also by Shure and Electro Voice microphones, the ones that I use here in the studio, by the Arrakis Arc Talk Blue board. And let's go back here. And also by Pratt & Whitney Engines, dependable thrust that you can trust. And also, I just want to tell everybody, tiaras are by My Little Pony. So thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with whom I shall be consorting in less than about a half hour, because I am 50 feet roughly from the refrigerator, which is that way. And I run, of course, on heavy fuel. Thanks to Deborah Busby for being here tonight. Thanks to everybody for being in chat. Thanks for listening live, and thanks for listening in podcast. God bless. Take care, everyone. Please be safe. And also, oh my gosh. Okay, promotion note. This Thursday, I'll be talking to Steve Stern. That's going to be at 3 p.m. A show on next Tuesday night, and Thanksgiving I have off. Everybody, again, thanks for being here tonight.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Night, Ben.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.